Thank you, Joyce. I think I'll begin with you. You talked about data, and and Ernest has actually presented also the same issues around data. So is this data available? What impression do you have of the different players, private sector, government? What is the readiness like?
Thanks, Martin. That's a great question. And everyone who comes into the AI space, they start with, oh, I want to do AI, where's the data? So in the lab, we had to build a data set ourselves. I think Ernest also mentioned the experience of building the Luganda data set and all other Ugandan languages just to do NLP work. So the data sometimes is not available if you're in a research space. And you have to build a data set yourself. Much of the image data that we have used to build our crop disease diagnosis models for farmers, we had to work very closely with the farmers to crowdsource, to send us the image data, to curate the data into a format that is AI ready to throw into the AI models. And I feel like for organizations, they might not be aware, but they are definitely collecting data on a daily basis. I think those are the things that Peter mentioned. They have a lot of data, but the issue is, how is the data being collected? How is the data being prepared? Do we have a goal in mind as we are collecting and looking at all this data to help inform policy? So for some organizations that are uniquely placed because of the nature of their work, it's very easy to get the data. I guess the thing would be around the aggregation, the data preparation, to be able to start to look into the insights that are in the data.
Thanks, Joyce, for that. And I know that the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance is also trying to work on a policy for data sharing. Peter, you are the Chief Technology Officer, and what I would like to ask you, what do you see as the critical gaps and the needs of AI and evidence-based decision making? What are the critical gaps?
Okay, so thank you. So before I became this chief thing, I used to be a director of many things for the government of Uganda, first for infrastructure, then for cybersecurity, and then for online services. So I want to start you from that side, because that's the most important side, and I think this is what I hear Joyce talking about. And in fact, I think you've more or less set us up, because what is happening here is, I'm wondering, why haven't we been talking, the three of us and the permanent secretary, because this is where the real problem happens. So what happened is, in the old days, when I started working, I used to work for the courts. When I came back from Japan as a fresh graduate, very anxious, I wanted to work for MTN, because everybody in MTN had a pickup with a yellow sticker. And I wanted to be one of those people who would park in the evening at pubs with the yellow pickup and get respected. Sadly, I didn't get that job. I went and worked for the government. I think Danida was funding something at the judiciary. We were trying to automate the court case process, which we did. And then at the same time, something came up in the Ministry of Finance. They're automating the financial management process to pay people. Something came up in lands, they're automating. So I was lucky to have worked in all these automations. By the time I left the government, Dr. Amin, I was a board member at NITA. I think I had done 444 online services for government. Now, sounds good, right? We're automating. But they were all not talking to each other. And therefore, for people like Joyce or Susan, who want to make some meaning out of that data and make some value, it was impossible for them to do that. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I told my board members that I'm going to hold them and take them to a country called Estonia. And our dear permanent secretary, you know, life has a way of throwing curveballs at people, because she was the head of the Digital Transformation Committee on the board. So I told her we have to go to Estonia. She said, what? Estonia? Where is that? What are we going to do? I said, because Estonia, everything is done online, because they've integrated their databases, except 2 things. You can't get married online. You can now? Okay, that's good, Flavia. Thank you very much. So you don't have to meet your spouse. Those days they were very concerned about the physical contact. And the other one was you couldn't transfer land. Sorry, you couldn't divorce online. Yes, that was the third one, because of course you had to look at each other and be sure that you really want to stop this thing. So we went, and after that I told them, let's go to Singapore, because I had gone to university in Singapore, and for me I was just blown away about how everything, even a permit for a cat, is online, you know. So eventually what happened is that these, and I think she's going to talk about it, they supported us to get technology that would bring all these data sets together and make meaning. And now that I'm in the private sector, I'm one of the biggest beneficiaries, because for us, from the financial services perspective, if we're doing KYC, know your customer, we want to cross-check against many different data sets. NIRA, which was born out of NITA when I was there, because we were the project leads for that National Security Information System. So we built this thing knowing that online services would depend on it. Taxes, business registration. That guy you see there, Osbat was one of the people who used to work with me, and we had a thing that we're trying to do with Uganda Investment Authority, so that an investor comes and applies once, and all the things, KCCA, all those licenses are done once. You remember that, Osbat? So that power of the data now has helped us to understand why Uganda was lagging behind as opposed to the other countries in East Africa. And this, now we're benefiting from it in the private sector. The last one I want to give you, and this is around how policy is very important, and she's going to talk about the data sharing principles, I hope. The other thing that we realized in the process is that we were requiring people to fill in the same information that the government already had. And that was really, really annoying. So today, for instance, if you apply for a passport, the problem is in this country is that when things happen, we forget too quickly and take them for granted, and we ask for more. But it's a good thing, because for us who develop those things, we work hard. So if you're applying for a passport now, you don't have to go to the LC to get your... You remember in the old days you had to get an endorsement? Do you know why? Because the process of getting a national ID, which is a prerequisite for applying for a passport, includes that citizenship verification. So we no longer do that. So I'm trying to show you how the power of data can influence policy and make things much more efficient, much more comfortable, because the 70% young people of this country, they're just not going to line up for services. You know that. They're not. They'll go somewhere else. They'll go to Kenya, they'll go to Rwanda, they'll go to Tanzania. After all, we can all move around, and they will live there and leave us here to die on our own. So I think that AI can play very, very important, and it is now in the public sector, which is private sector is also benefiting from it. It can play a very important role, but it starts with one, having the data, the compute power now we have, but also to have the ability to share that data, because now I think one of the challenges that we are going to put to the government, you know, that time when I was in the government, people used to put these challenges to me. Now I'm the one who puts it to the government. So one of the challenges I think they have now is the fight between protecting data and making certain data sets available for research, for growth, and for innovation and policy making. So that is where there's a pull and push. Some people are saying my data is private. That's how we used to struggle with government agencies, to tell them release data, and they would say, no, this one is private, you have to ask the permanent secretary. And those days, the permanent secretaries were people who could not even sit next to. Now, now they are here, they are available. So I think one of the issues that you need to deal with now is to have some kind of open data policy, especially for researchers like this, because everybody is now hiding behind that whole data protection law to say, you know, we can't share this data, it is private, personal identifiable, but, you know, for some of us, we are willing to allow our data to be available. I've taken too much time, but you know I have two hats. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Now let's hear from Susan. So given the nature of work that you're doing and your target audience at UNICEF, what do you see as the opportunities for machine translation technology? And then what do you see any challenges and for the adoption for such AI technology?
Thank you very much. Who are your reporters here? Do we have your reporters? 1, 2, 3. Okay, guys, there is a platform we call YouReport. Yeah? And YouReport started, the beauty of it is YouReport was birthed in Uganda. YouReport is global. There is YouReport Nigeria, YouReport in the Asian countries, several countries have YouReport. And why? YouReport is a very powerful tool. We use YouReport to source feedback from the general public, from young people, from the youth. And it's very interesting when you sit at the platform and see what is coming in. Messages come in from all parts of Uganda, and messages with different topics, several languages, those that you cannot interpret, those that you imagine what the young person is talking about. That is what YouReport does. And what happens with YouReport? At the moment, we have a team that is seated there, dedicated to YouReport. The Ministry of Health Help Desk, it served so much, by the way, during the pandemic, COVID crisis, because we were getting all these reports and messages of signs, symptoms. We're using it to train the public, to train young people, symptoms and identification of COVID cases, reports, several things that it does. And where am I bringing it here? YouReport is running in English right now, but we are getting these messages from several sources. And how can we make such a tool useful to somebody that is out there that does not speak English, they do not understand English? How do we bring this tool to somebody with a disability? How do we bring it to somebody who cannot speak? The people, literacy is a challenge. And this is where we see an opportunity for machine learning and AI in bridging this gap with those target audiences that we want to reach. A second example I can infer is, I hope, has anyone heard of the child helpline, Sauti? Sauti, yeah? 116. And 116 is run by the Ministry of Gender. And it's also very interesting to see what Sauti had during the lockdown. That the cases of domestic violence shot up, child abuse shot up, very many cases are shot up. And this is from Sauti. And the way Sauti works, there is the child helpline team that sits up Nakawambuya. And these guys are the guys that are receiving those cases, and they route them. They are counselors. When a child calls 116, they are distressed and they are reporting a case. Sometimes they can't speak. Yeah. When a child has been defiled, they are too traumatized. There are certain things that they are going to do. They may not come out and tell you that they've been defiled, they've been raped, but this information has to reach the decision makers. It has to reach the authorities that can help that child to take that action. So how are we doing this? We are relying on the human resource that is there. And you know that the human resource does not know that a child will be raped at 3 a.m. So they are not there at that time. What can AI help us how can AI help us to address such challenges? In other words, if a child, we can have AI to detect certain behavior characteristics in children, and we know what solutions that we can tailor to address such. AI can help us with literacy challenges that we have in the country, to help us tailor programs that address literacy challenges. AI is able to help us with learning. Children are in school being educated, but they're not actually learning. Right now, what we are basing on is the grades, but the grades will not tell you whether actually the child has learned or not. But with the intelligence of AI, these aspects that the human brain may not be able to pick up, there's potential for AI to fork out. So we're seeing all these opportunities that AI can provide for us. What was the second question, sorry? Thank you. The challenges for adoption, and these really scope in different aspects. I will probably not talk more about what Joyce. She has already expressed what AI needs to have, what the algorithms, what the models need to have. We need to be able to trust them. They need to be accurate. They need to have to be able to interpret the challenges that we give them, and we derive solutions from them. So I'll leave that at the platform level. However, there are other challenges that we see that would really hinder or delay the adoption of AI, especially in our context as Uganda. And I'll also not talk about the policy, the policy framework that will enable AI to come into play. And perhaps we can leave the policy to the PSPs here, and it's being addressed in the national ICT policy. But there are aspects of tools and devices, yeah? The other day I saw a report which talked about 2 million smartphone users, but you'll agree that some of these solutions need these devices available for us to be able to embrace the power and the opportunities that AI presents to us. So we need those tools. If we are going to make assistive devices for blind children with visual disabilities, we are going to need those devices that can address that. So we see the challenge in terms of tools and devices, and then we have connectivity and the cost of internet. You will agree that the cost of internet is still very high. And while we have connectivity in the urban and peri-urban places, the last mile connectivity is a challenge. We still have areas that are not covered by our MNOs in Uganda. How do we reach those populations there? And there are actually a good big number of them. And then the other one is about accessibility. How do we build skill and capacity to be able to provide for AI solutions and platforms? Okay, I think let me stop at that, and I have gone on and on.
Yeah, thanks.
There are a lot more. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that. And I think after this panel, people will appreciate that AI is with us here, although there are still challenges. It was clear that it is being used in environment, in finance, in education, in several areas, and agriculture. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all the applications. Also at Pulse Lab Kampala, we have been doing artificial intelligence. We have a speech-to-text technology for Uganda and Acholi, and we were monitoring gender-based violence using the radio during the lockdown. So we have all the perceptions that people had, and I mean, it was a difficult time, especially during the lockdown. You know, two people who were never together had to stay in the house for quite long, and of course there were issues of money, and so it was very, very difficult for people. And then also at Pulse Lab Kampala, we have also been trying to see how can data be shared, especially from telecom companies, because during COVID, actually in other countries, they were able to use it to understand whether people are adhering to the measures that were put by the Ministry of Health. But the good thing is that already AI is here. So what we need to do is we need to join hands, and I would like to call upon everyone here to join Data Science Africa Uganda effort. I'm happy that most people here, we have Ernest, who is part of the committee. Joyce is part of the committee. Osbert is part of the committee. Claire is part of the committee. Ivan is part of the committee. Dr. Jingo is part of the committee. Engineer is part of the committee. So we call upon all other people to join us and let us build the capacity, because the capacity is still lacking in Uganda. And let's also increase awareness. You know, when you talk about AI, sometimes people think it is scientific fiction. You know, they think of robotics, but it is something that we interact with in our everyday life, so it's good to promote it. So at the African Union level, actually, they are looking at coming up with a strategy